Harry's Wife, 102.17. Archetypes, Fridge Magnet Platitudes. Oh, great rejoicing amongst the nations of the world, for Archetypes is back on air. Yes, I'm sure that you all went running to Spotify on Tuesday to listen in on the latest nonsense and word salad that the Duchess of Industrial Beige is spilling across the airwaves. Of course, naturally it behooves me to analyse it, as there is a wealth of material that we can gain from it. But first, why don't we dive in and verbatim find out what was actually said? I'm not going to subject you to that syrupy, sugary, ridiculous voice, and nor am I going to impersonate her on this occasion. Instead, I'm just going to read a section of what started at the beginning. Harry's Wife. Growing in Los Angeles, these are the types of food I would eat. Tamales, gourmet sabzi, larb, matzo ball soup, adobo, along with your usual kid fare of chicken nuggets and fries and burgers and pizza. And the types of languages I would hear, honestly, more than you can imagine. From Armenian to Farsi, Korean, Spanish, Hebrew. It's all rather impressive as a child, isn't it, that she recognises all those languages? Oh, you're so talented. Los Angeles, despite how segregated it sometimes felt, was full of culture that you could see, feel, hear, and taste on a daily basis. The multitude of Asian cultures was a huge part of that for me. It would look like Asian people, you're now in her sights as being BFFs. Character trait acquisition. My weekends were spent in Little Tokyo, or having iced teas in Thai Town, or sitting with friend Christina Wong and her parents at a local Chinese restaurant. Oh, she has an Asian friend as well. How fortuitous. Goodness knows how Harry's wife got anything done, because she was friends with black people and white people and Asian people, and she was busy setting Procter & Gamble straight, and she was busy not eating at Sizzler but then was eating at Sizzler, and then she was busy being a princess and ordering all of her friends around. My, what a busy little bee she was. I remember this so vividly, and them teaching me why chow fun with dry noodles was so much better than chow fun with wet noodles. Now, obviously, I had a real fixation with food, not much has changed there. But more than that, I had a real love of getting to know other cultures. And part of that, my mom and I would often go to the Korean spa together. Now, those of you who haven't been to one before, it's a very humbling experience for a girl going through puberty, because you enter a room with women from ages 9 to maybe 90, all walking around naked and waiting to get a body scrub on one of the tables lined up in a row. All I wanted was a bathing suit, but you're not allowed, by the way. And once I was over that adolescent embarrassment, my mum and we would go upstairs. We would sit in the room upstairs, having a steaming bowl of the most delicious noodles, and we'd look around at all these other women. These beautiful Korean women who had embraced the generation traditional of the jjimjilbang and shared it with one another. Now, that was part of the Asian American culture that I knew. I hadn't known all the stigmas and archetypes that so many women of Asian descent specifically faced until many, many years later. Again, I think she means stereotypes, not archetypes. Those terms, ideas, and stereotypes, there we are, they just weren't familiar to me. Like the ones we see in so many movies and throughout pop culture. Movies like Austin Powers and Kill Bill. They presented these caricatures of women of Asian descent as over-sexualized or aggressive. And it's not just those two examples. There are so many more. But by the way, I'm not the only one who's taken notice. And at long last, somebody else is allowed to speak after that lengthy introduction of talking about herself as usual. Cho, this ancillary dark character in the side of Like the Shadows, playing this like evil exotic force, we sort of have to take those roles if we want to work at all. Harry's wife. That's comedian and actor Margaret Cho. And what she's referring to is the Hollywood trope of Asian women, which she knows all too well. Well, to my mind, hasn't she made a career off the back of taking the piss out of the trope, so therefore she's embraced it and made money out of it? Okay. It's actually a trope which she knows all too well, one of which, as you just heard her say, this evil exotic force, is more commonly known as the Dragon Lady. Then apparently mysterious music plays. Do you want to walk us through what the origin of Dragon Lady is? Cho states, well, Dragon Lady really comes from this sort of fantasy of Orientalism. It's actually a character that it's like, it's similar to the femme fatale in that, a woman who is beautiful and deadly. Because we can't just be beautiful. We have to have, it has to come at a cost. And it's kind of like Evil Queen adjacent. But it's also so pinned to this idea that Asianness is an inherent threat. That our foreignness is somehow gonna get you. The mystery and the exoticism of it is part of it. And unfortunately, that trope has really stuck to film, but also to Asian American women or Asian women. Harry's wife. The Dragon Lady, the East Asian temptress, whose mysterious foreign allure is scripted as both tantalizing and deadly. It has seeped into a lot of our entertainment. But this toxic stereotyping of women of Asian descent, this doesn't just end once the credits roll. I'm Harry's wife, and this is Archetypes, my podcast about the labels and tropes that try to hold women back. And today, I'm sitting down with two women who've broken out of the pervasive stereotypes that many East Asian women face. Cho, it wasn't exactly about not fitting in, because that was never an option. I was never going to fit in. But it was more about why her. I'm not what Koreans necessarily wanted their representation to be, but unfortunately, I was there. Harry's wife. We'll have more from comedian and actor Margaret Cho, and we'll also be hearing from broadcast journalist Lisa Ling. When I'm in an environment where I know I'm the only Asian woman in the room, I find myself shying away from it and asserting myself even more. Harry's wife. That's coming up. Stay with us. We'll see you after the break. And that takes us up to the break. Absolutely fascinating. And in the time it took me to read that to you directly from the transcript, and there's a hell of a lot more, but I'm not going to waste my time going through all of that. Instead, I'm going to refer to it from various articles instead. You get the impression, of course, it's all about Harry's wife. I suspect there that we have some revisions of history taking place, that we have some spurious recollections of what has gone on in the past. But how did this go down? Well, the Super Soaraway Sun, in an article by Sarah Grealish, states, mark her words, did Harry's wife take veiled swipe at royals? Duchess tells fans, be yourself. Wow. More groundbreaking fridge magnet platitudes with that observation in first podcast since Queen's death. Harry's wife today urged fans to be themselves no matter what. Wow. She's so perceptive, isn't she? In her first Spotify podcast since the death of the Queen. The Duchess of Sussex told listeners to disregard societal frameworks and ignore the loud voice coming from a small place. So you're telling people to ignore you? Well, first thing you've said right in years. After taking a 4-week break, Harry's wife looked happy to be on air with her own podcast. But listeners were later left wondering if she took a veiled swipe at the royal family during a discussion about defining ourselves. Harry's wife said, you want to be weird or sponge-like. What do you mean you want to be SpongeBob SquarePants again? Be silly or fierce or curious or even self-doubting or unsure some days and strong and brave and others. Whatever it is, that's up to you. Just be yourself no matter what any societal framework or archetype or loud voice coming from a small place tells you should be. Be yourself. Well, more word salad nonsense, hardly inspirational, and of course, fridge magnet platitudes. Harry's wife has previously been critical of life after joining the firm, including the claim she married a prince and lost her voice, just like Little Mermaid's Ariel character trait, acquisition. And in a tell-all chat in the cut, the Duchess claimed she had felt the negativity of being labelled ambitious after joining the royal family. During her first podcast, the Duchess discussed the Dragon Lady stereotype with journalist Lisa Ling and comedian Margaret Cho. She began by talking about her experience of growing up in Los Angeles, which was full of culture that you could see, feel, hear and taste on a daily basis, and she had a real love of getting to know other cultures. It then talks about her having the humbling experience, which I will mention in due course in greater detail. So it's reported there, but the point is that she didn't mention Her Majesty at any point in the podcast, although it was understood it was recorded before her passing. So if you're going to give her a pass, you would suggest that, well, it wasn't mentioned because it was recorded beforehand. However, given that the Queen was a woman and that these podcasts were all about women, you thought, and of course we know that she has the ability to go in and edit these things. After all, she crept back into the recording studio to nullify the threat to control posed by Mariah Carey's observations about her being a diva, as I've explained in parts passing. You'd have thought that if she is the empathic and respectful person that she believes herself to be, that she might well have made some mention of the Queen, but she did not. In Metro, the observation is Harry's wife discusses toxic Asian stereotypes in delayed new podcast episode. Harry's wife has resumed her podcast on Spotify after a 4-week break following the Queen's death. The 4th episode of Archetypes was released to the delight of fans, curious to hear if she mentions her stay in London with King Charles and other members of the royal family, but the 41-year-old seems to have avoided discussing the monarchy altogether. It then makes references again to her going to the spa, the type of food that she ate, and the toxic stereotypes as well. What are the observations about this? Well, below the line, so irritating, writes Chrissy. Rachel B., why do the press keep showing photos of her and Harry? I thought they wanted privacy. Linol, part of the Asian American culture I knew. If a reader put this in the comments box, they would have received an email notification advising their comment has been rejected. Free right now. How much more will this vile woman use on the back of the royal family to build her empire? Loftbits, Asian, pertaining to such a vast territory with so many different meanings. If Harry read her book, he might comment, noodles? Surely you meant curry, darling. But I doubt he reads those, unless forced to. Not many comments. There's a complimentary. Not many comments, rather, and they're certainly not complimentary about this. Of course, you'll notice, once again, that although it's meant to have guests on it, she does most of the talking. I can see that from the entirety of the transcript that was laid before me, but I'm going to save you the agony of having to listen to all the dribble that comes out of her mouth. Furthermore, we see the character trait acquisition as a consequence of now she's best friend to all Asians and thoroughly identifies with all of that because of her early experiences. In the way that it suits her to appropriate black culture because she deems herself to be biracial, all of a sudden, yes, I had lots of experience with Asians when I was a child, so I understand you. Talking about herself, self-absorption, character trait acquisition, management of the facade, all done to assert control. And I will be analysing more about archetypes because, of course, it is the dross that keeps on giving. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.